Well, good Wednesday morning and welcome to Connect, the California MBA's weekly podcast featuring one-on-one interviews with movers and shakers in the mortgage industry. I'm Dustin Hobbs, Communications Director here at the California MBA. Since we started a little late here in January, we took the first couple of weeks in January off. We're going to give you a bonus episode this month, so I'm excited to get into the conversation with our guest this morning and kind of find out her thoughts on the industry, where we're at. It's our final week of the month where we're going to discuss origination issues and strategies. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity to have a chat with her about where she sees the industry at the moment. So before we do that, though, I want to thank our sponsors over at Accelerate. So if you're looking to close more loans in 2021, and I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are, then you should probably check out Accelerate and experience Accelerate's award-winning customer engagement platform that features lead management, CRM, call routing, sales enablement, marketing automation, borrower engagement, and data intelligence through innovative use of multi-channel marketing, which includes text, social media, email, direct mail, phone, ringless voicemail, retargeting, and much more. And just on a personal note, if you're on LinkedIn and you know who Josh Friend is, if you're in the industry, and Josh is a really great guy and heads up Accelerate. So if you don't know him, you should get to know him on LinkedIn. It's a great way to touch base with them. And if you are interested in finding out more about Accelerate, head over to accelerate.com and schedule your demo today. Okay, let's get into the conversation. I'm excited to welcome in Lori Brewer, founder and CEO of LBA Ware, a company that's been a member of the California MBA for a number of years now, but we haven't actually had a chance to have her on the program yet. So welcome, Lori.
Thank you, Dustin. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and so for those that maybe aren't familiar with you or the company, why don't you take a minute and tell us a little about your background in the industry, how you got to the point where you started LBA Ware and what the company does.
Awesome. Well, I started out in engineering, so got my degree in architectural and structural engineering, which sounds a little different from where I am now, but in reality, it is designing and creating things. So I've always loved to create things that are both beautiful and functional. In architecture school, we learned a principle, form follows function, and that's what we try to do in our software, figure out the best way to architect a solution, and then the look follows that, the best solution to that problem. In going back a little bit, in high school, I was awarded an Air Force ROTC scholarship, then spent 4 years in the Air Force, and that's when, in the early 90s, dating myself, I worked myself into a webmaster role when the internet was just kind of coming of age, and fell in love with the idea of creating an environment where people could share ideas, access information in real time. At that point, it was worldwide mechanics, basically, on the C-130 that for the first time ever could get documents that didn't have to be mailed or faxed to them. So it was like magic, and I was addicted, and it's really not that far from the mortgage industry and the paper that we've had to push around for years. Following the Air Force, I joined a small startup that was an internet service provider that sold modems literally out of the back of a Kroger, and and we taught families and businesses how to get on the internet for the first time. And one day, somebody from the local mortgage company walked in and hired me to create what they called an intranet, and that's how my mortgage career started. Worked there for 10 years, and in the financial crisis of 2008, that lender unfortunately, finally ended up on the blow up list, which I've now forgotten what it was called.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how LBA Ware was started. I then did ad hoc software development for mortgage lenders across the country. Envoy Mortgage out of Houston, Texas was one of the first lenders to hire me to write a data warehouse, and that's how the company got started.
That's really interesting. I think of all the people I've spoken to in the industry in the last 15, 16, 17 years, you may have the more unique story. I don't think anyone's told me that they got started in the back of a Kroger selling modems. So that's a great story. Yeah. That's a great story.
It was interesting.
So let's fast forward to the present here. So CompenSafe, that's one of the products that LBA Ware sells. You got a position here as one of the industry's leading incentive comp management platforms, and it's giving you sort of an in-depth insight, I would imagine, into industry comp trends. So what key comp trends should we be looking at in 2021, and what did you see in 2020?
Yeah, CompenSafe is our flagship product. Its purpose in life is to automate the commission and bonuses and overrides for independent mortgage bankers, credit unions, and depositories. So we've had a really good 2020, as you can imagine, and we publish quarterly studies that show year-over-year changes. So our Q4 study just came out, I believe this morning, when that it should align with the airtime of this show. So please check it out on our website, lbaware.com. But I'll go ahead and discuss some of the trends we saw. And same trend we really saw in Q3 and Q4, which is no surprise to, I'm sure, anyone listening, but if in case you've been under a rock, volumes have been very high. And that, of course, is due to the interest rate environment. But because of that, and because loan originators are not paid on the profitability, but mainly paid on the volume and units that they fund, the LOs in our platform closed on average 60% more in Q4 of 2020 versus Q3. So on average, or sorry, Q4 of 2019. So in 2019, on average, they were closing about 1.6 million a month. In 2020, they were averaging 2.6 million a month per LO. So that's an easy 1 million more a month, which of course added to their paycheck. The average basis point rate really stayed steady from 19 to 2020, and that was around 105 bips. One interesting fact is that purchase transactions tend to pay a little bit higher basis point, and that's mainly because they're self-generated. Refinance a lot of times carries it's branch or company referred, but if it's self-generated, a lot of times those commission rates are a little bit higher. So what we saw is the purchase transactions were averaging about 111 bits in the fourth quarter. We also saw operational bonuses tick up, which is probably no surprise either, you know, and the fact that there was a lot of hiring also. So quite a few more people in the operational departments. The last thing I'll just kind of point out is we're proud that for our clients and our primary users, which are the back office and payroll and HR and compensation departments, regarding the people that had to handle all this volume. And most of those commissions are all unique plans, they're snowflakes. But for the most part, they did not have to size up their departments. They were able to leverage CompenSafe to process that increased workload.
One, obviously, that leaves room in the budget to hire more LOs to close more loans. I mean, seems like it fits right in with their their plan for last year and taking advantage of the refi boom.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully I think it'll sustain for the first part of this year. Hopefully we'll continue to have a great 2021.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Definitely a good year for people.
Yeah, no doubt about that. No doubt about that. So I guess this is maybe a related question then. So what are some best practices then for maximizing the impact of incentive comp plans?
Yeah, so we see a lot of different ideas. I would say the basics, are number one, just having a really clear, transparent, and easy to understand compensation plan. There's nothing worse than people questioning how they're paid. And I believe that's one of the best things that we're able to provide is, here's how the numbers add up. Here's how you got paid, because it does get, it can get confusing. So well documented, well explained, going into all the corners of things that can happen and making sure that that's all understood. As far as like the structure of those plans. We see some really good simple ones, and we see some really good complex ones. From the complexity standpoint, if you have really tight business processes and clean data, because it all comes down to clean data, then I believe strongly in coupling your production goals with quality measurements. So if you can tier like either operational bonuses or BIPs on volume, you can incent your lenders to go for those higher volumes in the month to hit higher basis point rates. And especially on the operational side, if you can then tie that with a quality measurement, that's key. But of course, it has to be, it has to be rock solid, no question on how those quality measurements are computed. But if it is very black and white, then I think that's just the ultimate, and to encourage both quality and production.
Yeah. Well, and I think you hit it right on the head in the beginning about having a clear and transparent plan. I mean, we've talked to a bunch of lenders here in the last year, and every one of them is focused, to a much larger degree than they would have been, 10, 15, 20 years ago on culture at the company. And I mean, there's nothing more corrosive to a culture at a company than, unhappy employees. So I think that fits right in with their strategy as well. So let's change gears here a little bit here. So you're obviously, you mentioned earlier that CompenSafe is sort of the flagship product for the company, but last year you launched LimeGear, which is sort of a turnkey BI platform designed for lenders. So what, from your perspective, what sets it apart from others in that BI space?
So, there's a couple things that get me really excited, and one is organizing data. So I feel like you go in, you get familiar with a business and what they're doing, and familiar with where their data is, and then finding ways to put that data together and have realizations about, how possibly that could be used to educate people across the organization on how to do things better. What's coming down, what's coming down the pipe tomorrow and next week, especially in your pipeline. You can only fix those problems if you know about them ahead of time. So that, LimeGear really goes back to my core. So like when I said I got hired out of the back of a Kroger by a lender, we spent 10 years, and that's all I did was just try to maximize every process and automate every process within that company. So this goes back to my roots. And it's so funny to me, Dustin, because like here we are in 2020, but a lot of those same problems exist. Accessibility to data, accurate data, and having it when you need it. And when I say that, what we're focusing on is the corporate office, yes, but really the people in the field, the branch managers, area managers, regional managers, anyone doing production that needs access to data in an organized, simplistic fashion to find out what's going on with their pipeline, where are they making money, where are they losing money, and what are their people doing. So especially with the fact that we've just hired a lot of people, what are they doing? Who stacks up above others? What are the practices they're doing that others could learn from? And that's what LimeGear provides. LimeGear provides all that information down the chain throughout the company so that people can manage their teams more effectively.
Yeah, well, and perfect timing too. Obviously, with everyone hiring last year. I mean, you couldn't get through a couple of scrolls on LinkedIn last year without seeing a huge bonus from some company for hiring LOs. So it definitely seems like you guys hit the right time on that. So much of the industry focus right now is on optimizing sales and managing pipelines to keep up with the ongoing refi boom, as long as rates stay somewhat where they're at, and take advantage of it while it lasts. So what are some of the tangible steps that lenders can take to improve in those areas?
Yeah, for me, and I'll share this. Before I left the mortgage company I was working for, it was 2006 and 2007, and everyone under the sun was trying to refinance their mortgage. And actually, for about 6 months, I started originating loans too, because I had created an online app, and we were taking in online applications, and there weren't enough people in the company to process those apps. And I was like, I just raised my hand. Well, can I get a commission if I process those apps? So from that, I learned every side and every position in the company, and it all comes down to, at the end of the day, communication, management of the people that your relationships, and doing the right things and making a phone call at the end of the process, making sure your borrower's happy and understands the clarity of what's going on. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say, and use technology. So there's all sorts of wonderful technology. A lot of people that have been on your show recently with some great technology that I believe in, that you can use to continue to manage and prune your pipeline and then keep up with those people over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. This is definitely a golden age of technology in the industry right now, on everything from every part of the life cycle of the loan is seeing a bump in the adoption and increase and effective use of technology. It's pretty amazing to watch. So, a question for you. So this last year obviously has been, to say the least, a change for many lenders in how their company operates, with so many people working from home now due to the pandemic. And then I think, I'm sure you're hearing this too from your clients, that this is not necessarily going to all go away once, sort of with the vaccine we hit, sort of herd immunity. Everyone's not going to flood back to the office. We're still going to be working a lot remotely for the foreseeable future. So, how can firms like LBA Ware help companies maintain origination volume and sales in that environment?
So I think from the perspective of any technology company, we're helping to distribute the information, through your computer. You can be anywhere. Your office is anywhere that you are, and you're able to access your data. So, here at LBA, we've, that 1 week in March when I think everyone did the same thing, I said, everybody take their laptops home. We'll be working from home for 2 weeks.
Just 2 weeks, that's it.
Yeah, right. Because, it was going to magically be gone on that 3rd week. But I think that's taught us a lot in that just managing from the perspective of having information at your fingertips, knowing and trusting, and having processes, educating, from my perspective, educating my developers on what's expected of them, and then I trust them, and then I'm also able to see what they're doing when they turn it in the production of the work. And the same thing in LimeGear is that, from a manager's perspective, whether they 100% trust that everybody's doing what they need to do, or if they want to make sure that things are getting done, the whole key from my perspective is having visibility into that data. Did the files get processed? Did they get turned into underwriting? Did we turn around, have a quick turnaround on the conditions? Are those files quality? Are we getting them to the closing table? Are our borrowers happy? Are those survey scores coming back good? What LO is closing the most production along with the highest customer satisfaction score? Or do we have some issues we need to address? There's a graph that one of my favorite pieces of LimeGear is KPI insights. So the ability to graph everything in a quadrants, so if I want to see production versus customer satisfaction, or speed to closing, or underwriting conditions versus my processors, number of loans they processed, I can see all that graphed out. And the visualization of data and having that in real time is key to running a business that runs on data and processes.
Yeah, well, and that, leads me right into my next question here. Obviously this last year, and in any time you have a refi boom, there's such a focus on volume and quantity, but obviously it's crucial to keep an eye on quality. So maybe you can maybe talk a little bit more about the importance of quality, and that I think this kind of gets to what you're talking about with LimeGear.
Right. So, and I know, you know, every lender does it in their own way, and they have different measurements, and they have different ways of seeing, you know, pulling quality measurements, and sometimes it's hard to discern kind of the gray areas of what people call a good file or a file that has holes. But I do think it can be a science. It can actually be laid out and documented on what's a quality file and what we are going to measure and not measure. As long as you have the ability to kind of turn those levers and control from a data perspective what you state is a good quality file, if that makes sense. So turning in a file that has multiple conditions, and it might be a self-employed borrower and all these things, so we know that there are certain files that are going to be more complex, but at the end of the day, it can be engineered. It can be put out on a mail.
Right?
What?
This is the engineer's mind talking right here.
I know, because you can lay it all out, you know, like giant spreadsheet. We replaced spreadsheets at LBA Ware, but you know, I love Excel. It's the best way to lay something out before you program it. So I'll sort of get off that topic, but as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about, like, you know, it's funny, all the LOSs have the exact same data points. You might have some custom fields, but at the end of the day, we're all doing the same thing. And so if you can lay all that out and tie things to it and then measure it and then see that on a graph, there's so many things that pop out that you might not notice going on in your business until you visualize it.
That makes sense, yeah. So let's switch gears here again. I'm curious, as a woman-owned business, what are your thoughts on the mortgage industry and how it can, you know, do more to develop a more diverse leadership class, if you will, and that's, you know, on every category: race, age, gender, all that. What are your thoughts on that?
And I'll add to that, veteran or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's important too. I think some of the organizations out there now are just fantastic. NAMBA, Tony Thompson, Next, Empower. They're shedding light, I think, on how important diversity and inclusion is really in our industry, in every industry. And I think those efforts will snowball because the truth will win, right? And having a diverse and inclusive culture is not only the right thing to do, but it makes good, smart business sense. And as that's why I really think, you know, I feel like it is snowballing. It'll start picking up more and more steam. We'll see more diversity in we have to, right? We have to find talented people. And I think it'll just make our industry stronger.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we actually just started here at the California MBA here in 2021. We just launched our own diversity and inclusion committee. So, and if you're interested in that, I mean, by all means, send us an email, reach out to us, and we'll get you plugged in there. So awesome. You mentioned culture. Tell us, you guys have kind of a unique culture there at LBA Ware. I'm really curious. Tell us about the chucks, if you will. Explain the purpose, the meaning, the thinking behind the chucks.
Yeah, I have my chucks sitting behind me. So
maybe you're gonna have to explain what they are, though. Maybe for someone who's some of our younger in our audience.
Yeah, true. There we go.
There we go.
Okay. How much time do we have? There's the short version and long version. I'll try and kind of condense it. But when LBA first started out, we were in this, you know, I thought it was a big enough office, but it was really like 4 rooms, and we had like 6 people. But one of the developers who was messing with mobile code created an app. I mean, it was just stupid, but it was called Chuck Check. And if you ran into someone again, it didn't go anywhere. You probably won't find it on the App Store. But if you ran into someone wearing Chucks, you would take a picture and post Chuck check, and it just had photo. It's so,
That's so funny.
we thought it was funny. We all bought Chucks in the office. We started wearing them on Friday as Chuck check. We would go out to lunch together back in the day when you could go out to lunch together. And that it just started a thing. I didn't really have anything to do with it. Then everybody, we wanted to buy people coming in that started with LBA Ware. It's kind of bizarre. When you get an offer letter from us, and then one of the primary question is what is your shoe size, and if people don't know what we're doing, but they get a new pair of Chucks on their first day at LBA Ware. So. And then we'd have a Chuck circle that you can probably see if you look on our website and photos. It's just been something fun.
That's so cool. That's totally the best kind of culture is one that develops organically like that. And, leadership gives the freedom for it to sort of grow like that. I mean, I have to imagine that is some great glue amongst the staff and the employees there at the company.
It's fun.
Yeah,
definitely
really
fun.
Cool. Well, we got time for one more question, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. So this last year has obviously been a big year when it comes to advocacy as well, both at the federal level and here in Sacramento at the state level. So what are your thoughts as a company that's been a member of the California MBA for several years now? What are your thoughts on the importance and the crucial role that advocacy plays in the industry? And what would your thoughts be, or what would you say to a member or a potential member who is considering getting involved?
To me, I mean, if you're part of the industry, you would be remiss by not being involved. I think the mission of the MBA and California MBA, which you guys are, I think, on the forefront of a lot of the topics and hot button issues. It's imperative to be a member if you're going to be in this industry, just to be involved in the issues you guys are discussing and keeping ahead of any legislation, especially when it impacts consumers and their access to credit, and therefore the industry's policies and things that we would have to do. Yeah, I'm 100% behind it, and I hope your membership's going up during this year, even though there's no conferences, because I know you've been involved in a lot of things, from forbearance to other things, and those issues are very important. And I personally am excited just from the perspective of getting together at events again, because I really miss being in a room and hearing about these things and talking about them. But I think everything that, as far as the advocacy efforts, are extremely important.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And I mean, hopefully we can see each other again this year, maybe later this year at one of our conferences. We've got a couple of conferences later in the year that we're sort of, at this point, we're planning on them being in person, but obviously we'll see if the pandemic and local and state restrictions allow us to do that. But that's certainly our goal. And I think everyone in the industry is definitely anxious to get back together and shake hands. And whether or not we work from home anymore, we certainly want to get together and add some social aspect to the industry, because I mean, it's a big industry, but it's also a really small industry as well. And so I think everyone's kind of missing that. Lori, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. This is really a lot of fun finding out more about the company and yourself. And so thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to talk with you, Dustin.
Yeah, and again, like I said, hopefully we see you later on this year. And if you enjoyed the conversation, make sure and subscribe to us here on our YouTube channel. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and we'll be back again next week for another episode of Connect. We'll see you then.